If I had to pinpoint the moment my life started unraveling, it wouldn't be the night my wife dropped her bombshell, or the weeks leading up to it when everything started feeling just a little off. No, it all started with a box of biscuits. Yeah, biscuits. Let me explain. It was a Wednesday morning, and I was in my usual spot at the kitchen table, minding my own business, sipping my coffee, and pretending to read the newspaper while actually reading the headlines and making up my own stories for the rest. My wife, Claire, was across from me, poking at her oatmeal like it had personally offended her. The only other sound in the house was our golden retriever, Duke, making the kinds of noises old dogs make when they sleep. That's when I saw it. Sitting on the counter, behind the coffee maker, was a brand new box of biscuits. Now, this might not sound like a big deal to you, but in my house, this was a phenomenon. You see, I love biscuits. Love them. My wife? Not so much. In the 10 years we'd been married, she had bought biscuits exactly 0 times. And yet, there they were. A blue box, unopened, taunting me. Now, any normal husband might have just asked, "Hey, honey, where'd the biscuits come from?" But I am not a normal husband. I am a man who watches too much true crime, and my brain immediately decided this was a clue in a grand conspiracy. So, I did what any reasonable man would do. I stole one. I grabbed the box when Claire wasn't looking, stuffed a biscuit in my mouth, and shoved the rest into my robe pocket. And let me tell you, it was delicious. But something was off. It was too delicious. That's when Claire turned and looked at me with narrowed eyes. "What are you doing?" she asked, suspicious. I swallowed so fast I almost choked. "Nothing." She glanced at my robe pocket, then back at my face. "Did you just eat one of my biscuits?" "Your biscuits?" I repeated. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. My wife was claiming biscuits, buying biscuits, eating biscuits. This was unprecedented. It was like walking in on your cat doing your taxes. I narrowed my eyes right back at her. Where did they come from? Claire froze for half a second, just long enough for my detective brain to go into overdrive. The store," she said, forcing a laugh. Wrong answer. My wife hated grocery shopping more than she hated my mother. She only went when she absolutely had to, and when she did, she came back with exactly the same 5 items every time. Coffee, oat milk, yogurt, a sad bag of kale, and overpriced granola that tasted like cardboard. Never biscuits. And yet, here they were. And Claire was defensive about them. A normal man might have let it go, but I am not a normal man. I am a man who once spent 3 hours creating an evidence board with red string when I thought Claire was secretly throwing out my favorite hoodie. So I dug deeper. "Which store?" I asked. Claire rolled her eyes. "Why does it matter?" "Because I know for a fact you didn't buy them at our usual store," I said, crossing my arms. "They don't sell these there." Claire's face did a weird thing, a mix between panic and irritation. And that's when I knew. Something was up with the biscuits. But before I could press further, she grabbed her phone, muttered something about being late for work, and practically sprinted out the door, leaving me alone with the biscuits. Now, at this point, any sane man would have shrugged it off. Maybe she just felt like biscuits. Maybe I was being crazy. But I am not a sane man. So I took the box to my office, sat down at my desk, and started investigating. First, I checked the brand. Imported. Interesting. Then, I checked the expiration date. Fresh. Then, oh, and this is where things got real. I checked the receipt. You see, Claire is obsessive about receipts. She keeps all of them, organizes them, dates them. I swear, if there was a receipt Olympics, my wife would take gold. So I went through the folders she kept in the kitchen drawer. And there was no receipt for biscuits, which meant one of 2 things. Claire paid for them in cash, unlikely, because she uses the credit card for everything, even a single banana. Someone else bought them for her. And that's when my stomach dropped. Now, I know what you're thinking. Come on, man. You're getting all worked up over a box of biscuits? And normally, I'd agree with you. But the thing is, this wasn't the first time something felt off. Lately, Claire had been distant, coming home late, always on her phone. Little things that, by themselves, meant nothing. But now, with the biscuits, I had to know. So I did what any completely rational, well-adjusted husband would do. I followed her. Now, let me just say, I am not a professional stalker. I had no idea what I was doing, but I had watched enough cop shows to know the basics. I kept a safe distance, wore my most inconspicuous hoodie, which happened to be bright red, mistake, and drove my own car, also a mistake, because Claire obviously recognized it. Somehow, despite my amateur tactics, I managed to trail her downtown, where she pulled into a parking lot. And then I saw him. A man. Tall. Suit. Biscuits? I froze, heart pounding, watching as Claire walked up to him. And then, oh, this is the part that almost made me throw up. She handed him the biscuits. The same biscuits that were in our kitchen. I didn't know what was going on yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This was bigger than biscuits. So, there I was, sitting in my car like some washed-up detective in a bad movie, staring at my wife handing a man a box of biscuits. Except this wasn't a movie, and I wasn't a detective. I was a husband who suddenly had way too many questions and not enough answers. Claire stood there, all casual, talking to this guy like they were old friends. The guy? Tall, suit, expensive-looking watch. The kind of guy who probably had opinions about wine pairings and wore socks that matched his tie. I hated him immediately. I had no plan, no strategy, just an increasing need to figure out what was going on. So I did the only thing that made sense. I got out of my car and walked toward them. Not sneaky, not subtle. Just full-on approached them like a man who had nothing to lose. Claire saw me first. Her whole body tensed up like she'd just been caught stealing from a church donation box. The guy, on the other hand, turned around slowly, like he had all the time in the world. That irritated me even more. "Brian," Claire said, forcing a smile. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I repeated, folding my arms. Great question. Almost as great as why is my wife handing a grown man a box of biscuits in the middle of a parking lot? The guy smiled, extended his hand. "You must be Brian. I've heard a lot about you." I ignored his hand. "Yeah? Because I've never heard a damn thing about you." Claire cleared her throat. "This is Greg. From work." I looked at Greg. He was the type of guy whose hair had never once been out of place. His shoes were so polished I could see my reflection in them, which just pissed me off more. And Greg from work needed biscuits because... I asked. Greg chuckled, like this was all some big misunderstanding. "It's an inside joke," he said. "Claire and I always argue about which brand is better, so she brought these for me to try." I stared at him, then at Claire, then at the biscuits. "So let me get this straight," I said, rubbing my temples. Claire, who has never once bought biscuits in our entire marriage, suddenly decided this was the perfect time to start. Because of a work argument? Greg nodded, like that was a totally reasonable explanation. And that's when I knew. Something was definitely going on. But I wasn't going to get answers in a parking lot, especially with Greg standing there looking like he was about to invite me to a networking event. So I played along. "Huh," I said, pretending to accept it. "Okay, enjoy your biscuits, Greg." Then I turned to Claire. "I'll see you at home." I walked back to my car, got in, and drove away, but my mind was racing. Claire had lied to me, and I wasn't about to let that slide. That night, Claire acted like everything was normal. She made dinner, asked about my day, and pretended like we hadn't had a weird confrontation in a parking lot. I played along, acting like I had bought the biscuit excuse. But the next morning, I took a little detour before work, straight to her office. I knew Claire had a big meeting scheduled in one of those glass-walled conference rooms, so I strolled into the lobby like I owned the place. The receptionist looked up, clearly confused. "Can I help you?" "I'm just here to drop something off for Claire," I said, holding up a paper bag. She hesitated, but I gave her my best "trust me, I'm not insane" smile, and she waved me through. I walked straight to the conference room, and there she was, sitting at the table, next to Greg, laughing at something he said. I didn't hesitate. I knocked on the glass, hard. The entire room turned to look at me. Claire's face went pale. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Hey, honey," I said, all cheerful. "Just wanted to drop off your lunch." Dead silence. I placed the bag in front of her. "Made it myself. Thought you'd need some energy for all those important biscuit debates." Greg looked away, suddenly very interested in his notebook. Claire's boss, an older woman with an unfortunate bowl cut, cleared her throat. "Sir, we're in the middle of a meeting." "Oh, I don't mean to interrupt," I said, smiling. "I'll just be a second." Claire's hands clenched into fists. "Brian, go home." I leaned in. Should I take Greg with me, since he's such a big part of our lives now? Greg made a weird choking sound. The whole room was watching, uncomfortable but entertained. Claire stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "Excuse me, everyone," she muttered before grabbing my arm and dragging me into the hallway. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she hissed. "What's wrong with me?" I shot back. "I'm not the one sneaking around with some biscuit enthusiast behind my husband's back." Her eyes darted around to make sure no one was listening. "You're embarrassing yourself," she snapped. "I don't care," I said. "I want the truth, Claire. What's going on?" She hesitated, and that's when I saw it. That split second where she considered telling me the truth. But then she forced a smile. "Nothing. It's just work stuff, Brian." I took a step back. "Fine," I said. "Then I'll keep digging until I find out myself." And with that, I walked out. Claire didn't call me, didn't text me, and that's how I knew. She was hiding something big. I just had to figure out what. I didn't go straight home after storming out of Claire's office. I needed a plan. The problem was, my only lead was some rich-looking biscuit enthusiast who apparently had inside jokes with my wife. I had nothing solid, just a gut feeling that something was way off. So, I did the next logical thing. I went back to Claire's office. Not to confront her again. That ship had sailed. No, I wanted information. I parked down the street and waited until I saw a group of employees heading out for lunch. Then I casually joined them, walking into the building like I belonged there. It was risky, but corporate buildings are full of forgettable-looking guys like me in jeans and button-ups. Nobody stopped me. The receptionist barely looked up. Now, I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I figured if I could get a look at her office space, maybe I'd find something useful. Then I spotted a guy I recognized. One of Claire's coworkers, Brad. Brad was the kind of guy who wore golf polos every day, even though he didn't golf. He also had a habit of oversharing after 2 drinks. "Perfect. Brad." I called out, acting like we were old pals. He turned, confused at first, then grinned. "Brian, what's up, man?" I clapped him on the shoulder like we were fraternity brothers. "Nothing much. Claire left her laptop charger at home. Thought I'd drop it off." "Oh, dude, she's not even at her desk," Brad said, lowering his voice. "She's probably with Greg." I pretended like I didn't already hate Greg's guts. "Oh yeah? They working on something big?" Brad snorted. "Something like that." He looked like he wanted to say more. So I let the silence drag out. Finally, he caved. "Let's just say Greg's been real close with Claire lately." There it was. I forced a laugh. "Yeah, man, I noticed. She even bought him biscuits." Brad's face lit up. "Right? And she hates biscuits." We all thought it was weird. Greg's got that effect on women, though. Ever since his divorce, he's been... He made a vague hand gesture. "You know, around." I didn't know if I wanted to punch Greg in the face or buy Brad a beer. Instead, I played it cool. "Man, I'd love to see what all the hype is about. Think I could catch a glimpse of Claire's office?" Brad hesitated. Then he did what all office workers do when given a chance to show off their workplace. He led me straight in. Claire's desk was neat, too neat, almost like she'd been hiding something. That's when I saw it. Her employee ID badge, sitting right there. "You mind if I leave the charger on her desk?" I asked. Brad shrugged and wandered off, leaving me alone. I grabbed her ID. I had no idea what I was going to do with it yet, but I wasn't leaving empty-handed. The idea hit me as I was leaving the building. Security footage. Most corporate offices have security cameras. If Claire and Greg had been sneaking around, there might be footage. And now, I had an access card. I just needed a reason to be in the security room. I walked around the building until I found a door labeled Security. I took a deep breath and knocked. A stocky guy with a buzz cut opened it. "Yeah." I held up Claire's ID. "Hey man, my wife left this, and she's freaking out. Said she needs it for a client meeting, like, right now?" The guy sighed. rubbing his temples. Man, I just saw her leave for lunch. You couldn't catch her? I shook my head. She's not picking up, and if I don't bring this to her, she's going to kill me. He grumbled something under his breath, but he waved me in. The security room was exactly what I hoped. Monitors everywhere, footage rolling from different angles. I handed him the ID. While I'm here, can I ask you a favor? The guy gave me a look. What kind of favor? I leaned in like we were about to discuss illegal business deals. Look, man, between you and me, I think my wife might be cheating on me. His eyebrows shot up. I just need to see if she's been, spending a lot of time with someone lately. The guy let out a low whistle. Damn, dude. He thought about it for a second, then shrugged. You know what? Screw it. I hate Greg anyway. Bingo. He pulled up the footage. Let's see. This was yesterday, he muttered, fast-forwarding through clips. There she is. On the screen, Claire stood in the lobby, waiting. Then Greg walked up. They didn't hug, they didn't touch. But the way she looked at him, that was enough. Then they left together. Where'd they go? I asked. The guard clicked around, switching cameras. He found them in the parking garage. And that's when my stomach twisted. Because Greg wasn't just getting into any car. He was getting into Claire's car. They drove off together. I clenched my fists. Can you check today's footage? I asked. The guard nodded, clicking through. There they were again. Same routine. Claire waiting. Greg showing up. Getting into her car. Only this time, they kissed before they got in. I exhaled sharply. That's enough. The guard shook his head. Man, I'm sorry. I stood up, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, thanks for this. Really? He gave me a sympathetic nod. Don't do anything crazy, man. I walked out, and for the first time in my life, I had no idea what to do next. I didn't go straight home after seeing the security footage. I wasn't ready. Instead, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Claire, kissing Greg, getting into her car like it was their car. I needed to do something, but not something stupid. I wasn't about to scream, break things, or start throwing punches. That's what Greg would probably expect. Some jealous husband losing his mind. No, I wanted something better. Something that would stick. So I took a deep breath and started planning. Step 1. Information. If Claire had been sneaking around, I needed details. How long? How deep? Who knew? And more importantly, what exactly did Greg have that made her risk everything? Step 2. Humiliation. Claire had lied to me, in our own home, like I was some idiot who couldn't tell biscuits from betrayal. That wasn't going to stand. Step 3. Leverage. This wasn't just about making her feel guilty. I wanted control of the situation. If Claire thought she could waltz back into our home like nothing happened, she had another thing coming. I didn't have everything figured out, but I knew where to start. I spent the next 2 days gathering information. Claire acted normal at home, which made me sick. Every time she smiled at me, I imagined her smiling at Greg. Every time she checked her phone, I wondered if she was texting him, but I played along. Busy day at work? I asked over dinner. She shrugged. Same as usual. Meetings, spreadsheets. You know how it is. I nodded, pretending to care. Greg keeping you busy? She barely hesitated. Oh, Greg? Not really. We're working on a project together, but nothing crazy. I almost laughed in her face. Nothing crazy. Huh? Just sneaking off to parking garages for kisses. Just hopping into his car like some secret getaway. I forced a smile. Good to hear. Then I went back to my own plan. First, I called Brad, Claire's talkative coworker. Hey man, I said, keeping it casual. You got a minute? Yeah, what's up? Just wondering. How long has Claire been working so closely with Greg? Brad let out a low whistle. Dude, I knew something was weird. You're not the only one who's noticed. They've been getting real cozy for the last couple of months. Lunches together, closed-door meetings. Hell, Greg even started showing up at the office on her work-from-home days. That was news to me. Her what? Yeah, man. Thought you knew. Claire's been taking remote days, but Greg still meets her in the office. They say it's project work, but come on. I clenched my jaw. Appreciate it, Brad, I said. Hey, if you ever need more dirt, let me know. I'm always down for a little drama. I had my next clue. Claire had been lying about working from home. Now it was time to prove it. I spent the next few days setting the trap. First, I set up a dummy email account. Then I wrote a message from an anonymous coworker and scheduled it to send to Claire's company's HR department. Subject: Greg Thomas and Claire Morgan. Policy violation. Hi. I'm writing because I've noticed inappropriate behavior between Greg Thomas and Claire Morgan. Their relationship seems too close, and it's creating an uncomfortable work environment. They frequently leave together, have private meetings, and Greg even comes in on Claire's remote work days. I hope this is investigated. Concerned employee. Was it a little underhanded? Absolutely. But I wasn't about to play fair with two people sneaking around behind my back. Then, for extra measure, I scheduled another email, this one to Greg's boss, making sure the higher-ups knew Greg was spending more time chasing married coworkers than doing his job. Once that was set, I moved on to step 2, public humiliation. Claire had no idea what was coming. That weekend, we were supposed to have dinner with her parents. I insisted we go. She hesitated. Maybe because she was worried I knew something, but I played it perfectly. I smiled. I laughed. I made her feel comfortable, and then I told her I had a surprise. Since you've been working so hard, I got you a little something, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Oh. I handed her an envelope. She opened it, pulling out a printed itinerary. A spa weekend, she read. Yup, I said. 2 days at the best place in town. You deserve a break. Her eyes softened. Brian, that's really sweet. Inside, I was laughing, because Claire wouldn't be going to any spa. The reservation was fake, and while she was expecting a relaxing weekend, she'd actually be dealing with the fallout of my next move. Monday morning, I left for work, as usual. Except I didn't go to work. I went back to Claire's office. This time, I didn't need Brad, because as soon as I walked in, I saw the chaos. HR was in a meeting room. Greg was arguing with someone higher up. People were whispering. I strolled right past them and headed to Claire's desk. She wasn't there. I checked my phone. Claire, hey, something weird is going on at work. I think someone reported me and Greg to HR. I replied immediately. Me? Oh no. Who would do that? She didn't answer. Instead, she called. I let it ring. Then I sent one last message. Me? Oh, by the way, check your email when you get a chance. Because waiting in her inbox was a little surprise for me. Screenshots of her own security footage, showing her kissing Greg, sneaking off in her car, and lying about working from home. And the best part? I was nowhere to be found. She'd have no idea where I was. No idea what I'd do next. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Claire didn't come home that night. I wasn't surprised. She was probably trying to clean up the disaster at work, scrambling to save herself and Greg from whatever HR had thrown at them. Maybe she thought I'd be waiting at home, demanding answers. Maybe she thought I'd be the heartbroken husband, crying into my pillow, begging her for some pathetic explanation. She thought wrong, because while she was busy running damage control, I was finishing my plan. First, I called our bank and had my direct deposits moved to a new personal account under my name only. Claire had never bothered with our finances. She had always left the bills and budget to me. That was about to bite her hard. Then, I contacted a realtor. How fast can you get a house on the market? I asked. Depends, the guy said. Are we talking about a rush sale? I need it listed by the weekend. That's fast, he admitted, but doable. I arranged a meeting for the next day. Claire had no clue that the house she was living in, the one I paid for, was about to hit the market right under her nose. Step by step, I was cutting her out of everything. The next morning, I checked my email. One unread message from Claire. Subject: we need to talk. I smiled. I didn't open it. Instead, I grabbed my phone and called Brad. Yo, he answered. Dude, what the hell happened? HR went insane yesterday. Greg looked like he was about to have a heart attack. I laughed. They fire him yet? Not yet, but he's on leave while they investigate. Claire, too. You should have seen The Office. It was like a reality TV show, but real life. Everyone's talking about it. Good. Let them talk. I owe you a drink, I said. Damn right you do. I hung up, satisfied. Greg was officially toxic at work. Even if he survived this, his reputation wouldn't. And Claire? She was right there with him. Now, I just had to set up the finale. I spent the rest of the day getting things in place. First, I called Claire's parents. Hey, Brian, her mom answered cheerfully. How are you two? I almost laughed. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Claire. Have you spoken to her lately? No, why? I sighed, making sure I sounded concerned. I didn't want to be the one to say anything, but I think something's going on with her. Her mom immediately switched to panic mode. What do you mean? Is she okay? She's been acting different, distant. And then yesterday, I found out. I paused. Look, I don't want to accuse her of anything, but she's been spending a lot of time with some guy at work. Enough that HR got involved. Her mom gasped. Oh my God. She hasn't come home, I continued. I'm worried she might be too embarrassed to talk to you about it. Maybe you should reach out? Oh, I will, her mom assured me. Right now. Perfect. Claire's mother was the definition of relentless. If she wasn't already panicking about her daughter's moral decline, she would be soon. I barely had time to enjoy it before my phone buzzed again. Claire. I ignored the call. Then came a text. Claire, Brian, I need to talk to you. Please. I let her wait. An hour later, another text. Claire, can we meet somewhere? This time, I replied. Me? Sure. Let's meet at home. I wanted her to see exactly what was waiting for her. When Claire finally walked through the door, she looked terrible. Her hair was a mess. Her usual confidence was gone. She had dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept. Brian, she started. I held up a hand. Before you say anything, check the mail. She frowned but walked over to the kitchen counter, where I'd left a neat little pile of envelopes. First, the notice from our bank. Our joint account now had only my money in it. Then, a letter from the realtor, confirming our house was being listed for sale. And finally, a copy of the email I'd sent her boss. She skimmed through the papers, her hands shaking. Then she turned to me, furious. You, she swallowed. You're selling the house? Our house, I corrected. The one I pay for. The one you thought you could sneak around in like I was too stupid to notice. Her jaw clenched. Brian, I made a mistake, but we can fix this. I laughed. Fix this? Claire, you weren't just cheating. You were playing house with some corporate kin doll while pretending everything was fine. And now that it's all falling apart, now you want to talk? Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't want to lose you. You already did. She stood there, like she couldn't believe what was happening. Then, her phone rang. She glanced at it. I did too. Greg. I smiled. She didn't answer. Instead, she wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. So that's it? I nodded. That's it. And then, I walked out of my own house. Because it wasn't ours anymore. It was just mine. And soon, it wouldn't even be that. Claire had made her choice. Now she could live with it. Claire didn't follow me when I walked out of the house. She didn't shout my name, didn't run after me, didn't collapse into a dramatic heap on the floor begging for forgiveness like some bad soap opera. No, she just stood there, gripping that pile of paperwork, looking like a woman who had just realized she bet her life savings on a losing horse. And that was fine by me. I had one last move to make. I drove straight to the bank and closed our remaining joint accounts. Anything that was still in her name was now hers to deal with, including the mortgage. She was still on the loan, but I had already worked out a deal with the realtor. The second a buyer came through, she'd be looking for a new place to live. And that wasn't my problem. By the time I got back to my hotel, my phone had 13 missed calls. 5 from Claire. 4 from her mom. 2 from Brad, who probably just wanted updates. And 2 from a number I didn't recognize, but knew belonged to Greg. I sat on the bed, opened a soda, and ignored every single one of them. Then I turned on the TV and watched an old sitcom while I enjoyed the best damn drink of my life. Claire showed up the next morning. I knew she would. I let her knock for a full minute before I opened the door. She looked worse than before. Her usual perfect makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. She must have been really panicking if she didn't even have time to do her usual cheating wife cleanup routine. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice hoarse. I shrugged and stepped aside. She walked in, rubbing her arms like she was cold. "Brian, I held up a hand. "No speeches. Just say what you came here to say." She swallowed hard. "I lost my job." I almost smiled, but I held it back. "Huh. HR called me in this morning. They said my behavior was unprofessional, that my relationship with Greg had crossed a line, and that it violated company policy." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So what you're saying is, cheating on your husband wasn't enough. You had to screw over your career, too?" She flinched. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I tilted my head. "Which part? The affair? The lying? The part where you got caught?" She pressed her lips together. "I just need a little time, Brian. I need to figure things out." I let out a slow breath. "And what does that have to do with me?" She looked up at me, eyes wide. "I need you." I stared at her for a long time. Then I laughed. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "You need me? Claire, a week ago, you needed Greg." "That was a mistake," she whispered. "And so was coming here," I said. "Because I'm done." She shook her head. "I can't do this alone." "Well, lucky for you, you've still got Greg, right?" Silence. Then, she let out a bitter laugh. "Greg isn't returning my calls." Now that made me grin. She sat down on the hotel bed, head in her hands. "He said he needs space. That his reputation at work is ruined, and he doesn't know if he can handle a relationship right now." I whistled. "So the guy you blew up our marriage for ditched you the second things got tough?" Wow. Who could have possibly seen that coming? She glared at me. "Brian, please." I stared at her for a moment, really looked at her. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. Maybe she hadn't been for a long time. I didn't feel angry anymore. Didn't feel sad or betrayed, or even the tiniest bit sorry for her. I just felt done. "You should go," I said. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Just like that?" I nodded. "Just like that." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but I think she saw it in my face. It was over. So she stood up, wiped her eyes, and walked out the door. I didn't watch her leave. I just picked up the TV remote and turned the volume up, because I had better things to do. The house sold in 3 weeks. Claire tried to fight it at first, but the mortgage was too much for her alone, and she had no job. Last I heard, she moved in with a friend while trying to figure things out. Greg got fired a month later. Apparently, his reputation was so shot that no one wanted to work with him. Last I heard, he moved to another state, probably hoping for a fresh start where no one knew his name. I never saw Claire again, never answered her texts, never looked back. Instead, I got my own place, a smaller house, just for me. And for the first time in a long time, I was happy, because I had one. And Claire? She lost everything. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel